Welcome to this set of videos on Catholic social teaching. Catholic social teaching is a very broad field, so what I'd like to do in these videos is to concentrate on some key elements, and these key elements will give us a foundation from which we can think on a variety of different social issues. The issue of Catholic social teaching is important to me as a professor, and the reason is really highlighted by St. John Paul II in Ex Corde Ecclesiae, his document on Catholic universities. He tells us that the teaching and research of a Catholic university are meant to contribute to the practical life of the Church. He tells us that a Catholic university should produce graduates whose lives are grounded in Christian principles that prompt them to be not only active members of the Church, but also, and I quote here, help the Church respond to the problems and needs of this age. From another perspective, John Paul also argues that part of a university's mission is to be immersed in society, to be devoted to social service, and to serve as a medium for the development of individuals and society. So a Catholic university must be dedicated to studying what John Paul calls serious contemporary problems. These include the protection of the dignity of human life, promoting justice for all people, upholding family life, protecting natural environments, protecting peace and political justice, and a more equitable distribution of resources. It must be said, though, that a Catholic concern for social issues is distinctively Catholic. We may embrace politics, economics, and other subjects of study, but John Paul emphasizes that our commitment to social teaching goes beyond material concerns. That is, we go to a serious study of the underlying grounds of social concerns, and we have a special focus on the ethical and religious dimensions of social problems. And this is something that I think is very important. Catholic social teaching is not just another economic theory. It's not an economic or social program. Social teaching in the Catholic tradition is instead a moral theology of the challenges of our time. And importantly, Catholic social teaching does not exist in a vacuum. It exists within the foundational context of a Catholic theology, especially our theology of the human person. This is why the Second Vatican Council stated, and I'll quote, "The beginning, the subject, and the goal of social institutions is and must be the human person." That's why Pope John Paul II says that Catholic social teaching begins with the dignity of human persons. That's both individuals and communities. Now, as I've said in other presentations I've given on Christian anthropology and the Catholic intellectual tradition, as Catholics we believe that people have a dignity that is inalienable, and it is so because we are made in the image and likeness of God, something taught in the first chapter of Genesis. So within the Catholic tradition, as taught by St. John Paul II, Catholic social teaching will always be important because, as the Pope says, the Christian spirit of service to others for the promotion of social justice is of particular importance for each Catholic university. He says that in Ex Corde Ecclesiae, his document on Catholic universities. Before I go into some of the duties, rights, and principles of Catholic social teaching, I'd like to contrast Catholic social teaching with the dominant social systems of our time. And what this does is provide a bit of a clarification by contrast. And so remember that Catholic social teaching is founded on the intrinsic dignity and value of the human person. And this is something that fundamentally distinguishes Catholic social teaching from some of the more prevalent social systems of our time. Pope John Paul II identified materialism as the guiding philosophy of our age. Now, materialism has different manifestations. It's pervaded both capitalism and socialism. But materialism effectively places goods, services, and possessions as the most important of values. Materialism goes hand in hand with what St. John Paul II called economism. And this is something which is common to both the extremes of capitalism and socialism. Now, economism, where the economy is paramount, it treats persons primarily as labour in the capitalist system. The value of people is seen as subordinate to the economy. Now, in classic socialism, on the other hand, people are not regarded as intrinsically valuable, so there are no individual rights, nor are there inherent personal values. If you want a good example of that, or actually a bad example, after the Tiananmen Square massacre, the head of China, Deng Xiaoping, was asked, was the murder of these students not a violation of their human rights? Deng responded, the state has not given the rights to these people yet. It's a pretty horrible proposition to come to terms with, but in a way what Deng was saying was classic extreme socialism, that people don't have an intrinsic value and therefore do not have intrinsic human rights. Instead, their value lies in whether they are valuable to the state or not. So, in socialism, the value of a person is for the good of the state, and people are used, abused, even disposed of, as best suits the state. But a similar principle applies in capitalism. Extreme capitalism presumes that people exist as labour for production. So people's value lies in there being a means for producing goods and services. Now, in their extreme forms, capitalism and socialism begin not with human values, but with the good of the state or the good of the economy. Catholic social teaching, though, doesn't begin with the state, the economy, or production, but as Vatican II says, and I'll quote from Gaudium et Spes here, the beginning, the subject, and the goal of social institutions is and must be the human person. In a similar spirit, John Paul II says that Catholic social teaching begins with the dignity of persons. Goods, services, material things come second to the good of the human person. Now, very interestingly, up until the pontificate of Pope Francis, Catholic social teaching didn't offer what we call technical solutions to social problems. So the Church has never actually said that we must have a Jeffersonian republic, we must have a particular tax rate, or anything like that. In Laudato Si, though, the Pope did offer some technical solutions, but importantly, they were not nearly as important as the ethical and moral teachings put forward by the Pope. The Church's social teaching isn't an expression of the Church's expertise in economics. The Church's expertise there is limited. Rather, the Church's social teaching has a focus on human values that prompt the Church to understand and promote the happiness and dignity of human persons. That's what it's based on. The Church's social teaching is grounded in the belief in the dignity of all persons, and it holds importantly that solutions to the problems of people's dignity cannot be reduced to simply technical solutions such as economics or strictly social strategies. This is because, as John Paul II said, if that was the case, then human beings would be reduced to being merely material beings. So Catholic social teaching isn't just an economic theory. It is a moral theology, if you like, an affirmation of human dignity. And because human beings are more than material, Catholic social teaching takes us beyond merely material concerns to the immaterial, or those things that are transcendent, the things that make us truly human. Now, I mentioned that the Church's social teaching generally doesn't provide technical solutions. So we shouldn't misunderstand this teaching as being a third way between Marxist socialism or extreme capitalism. Instead, the basic aim of the Church is to investigate the social realities of our time and to interpret them in the light of whether they conform to the values of Jesus Christ or not. So the Church is not tied up in ideology, and I think this is very important. Sometimes people misunderstand Catholic social teaching to say it's a capitalist teaching, or it's a socialist teaching, or it's another sort of economic theory. It's not that. It's not a social ideology. It's a moral theology of our social world. And so Catholic social teaching is part of the Church's mission of evangelization. It's a mission of bringing the values of Jesus Christ to the social life of humanity. It expresses the Church's prophetic role, both of condemning injustice where human values are put down, and of commending justice where human values are upheld. In an abstract way, I've said that Catholic social teaching has a primary and foundational consideration that any social structure must be for the value and good of the people. Production, commodities, the state, the economy, these are secondary considerations, and they have to be considered in how they serve human values. I've said a lot there that is foundational and somewhat abstract. In the next 3 videos, I'd like to deal with some of the duties, rights, and principles that come out of Catholic social teaching.